All right, so in our last video, we talked about the kind of background context for understanding Africa in time periods 1 and 2, and kind of discussed what a Bantu influenced society looked like. So, what we're going to do in this video is take a look at Africa in time period 3. So, the previous video kind of serves as the background or the context for this video. So as we approach, we could say maybe a nice round number like 1000. As we approach 1000 CE, the small villages that we spoke about so much in the last video, the small villages start to form what might be called like defensive councils among many other villages. And these defensive councils start to look more and more like the centralized governments we've been seeing throughout the course. So maybe not quite as big and quite as strong or quite as rich, but they're starting to look like maybe China or Persia or the Islamic empires. And so what we're starting to see is the creation of what might be recognizable now as African governments, the same way we've seen governments in these other places. Maybe the most prominent of these was Congo, in Central Africa. There were other ones like Great Zimbabwe in Southern Africa. But we are going to turn our attention here to the spread of Islam into Africa, because that's the other major event that happens in sub-Saharan Africa during time period 3. And we are going to be focused mostly on West Africa, but we're also going to take a little bit of a trip to the East Coast and talk about those Swahili city-states again. So the first place to adopt Islam in West Africa is the Kingdom of Ghana. So Ghana in West Africa was the first major trading empire in West Africa. They traded two really important commodities. They traded gold, which, it's gold. That one's easy to understand. The other one is they traded salt. Salt is hugely important for people to survive. Salt is really important to preserve food, and it is a necessary mineral for life. So you actually need salt in order to live. In fact, salt was so sought after throughout, especially Europe, but in India and China too, that salt was actually more expensive than gold. The people of Ghana, or we'll say it like this, the government of Ghana adopted Islam in the 800s. And this is a result of the domestication of the camel, which linked Ghana to Islamic merchants in North Africa. The Islam of Ghana, however, was not especially devout or formal. In fact, they really only, practiced Islam when the merchants were around. And the point was to get better deals on the trades. So they really only practiced Islam when the merchants were around. And even when they did practice Islam, it was heavily influenced by traditional African religious ideas. So even when they did practice Islam, it was a very African version of Islam that wasn't exactly what the Islamic merchants in North Africa were looking for. Eventually, this kind of half-hearted adoption of Islam got the attention of very devout Muslims in North Africa, and they end up conquering Ghana in the 1100s. The next important trade empire in West Africa is the Empire of Mali. So Mali kind of incorporates and expands upon Ghana's territory. They're still trading gold and salt because that's still really sought after. And this place had now become pretty thoroughly Islamic. So this area is now over time now really Islamic. So we're now kind of like in the 1250s to kind of about the 1450s. Now, the one thing that you really need to know about Mali is one of their kings. So, one of their kings was probably the richest person to have ever lived. His name was Mansa, which is the word for king, Mansa Musa the First. And he is in charge of Mali from 1280 to 1337. Now, one of the reasons we know that this time, or Mali at this time, was very Islamic is because Mansa Musa was very devout, and he went on the Hajj in 1324. So we know this area was very Islamic because their king actually went on the Hajj, which was the Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca. And that's not something you do lightly. That's not something you do because you're pretending to be Islamic. That was a long journey from West Africa all the way to Mecca. When he went on the Hajj, he took with him 60,000 people, 12,000 of which were slaves, and each slave carried 4 pounds in gold, among other things. He had a new mosque built every Friday. So he sent people ahead of him so that they could have this mosque built for him every Friday so he could do his weekly prayers. And you can actually kind of chart his journey because some of those mosques still exist. So you could watch where he was going. You could follow his journey to Mecca if you looked to see where the mosques were. He spent so much money the value of gold declined by 25%. Because remember, another Islamic principle, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, is charity. And he had a lot of money, and he was very willing to give it out to people. So on his way back, he brought with him a library's worth of Qurans. And remember that there weren't printing presses, there weren't copy machines. If you were buying a library's worth of Qurans, that meant that each one of those was handwritten. And they were extremely expensive. And he bought a library's worth of Qurans back from Mecca. And he also hired two descendants of Muhammad to teach in his capital. Timbuktu. So Mansa Musa, like by himself, turned his capital into a center of Islamic learning and thought. Now, unfortunately, after Mansa Musa, Mali's leaders kind of caused the country to fall into decline and civil war. And they eventually kind of collapse in the early 1500s. But because of what Mansa Musa did, West Africa became very, very Islamic. Now, I do want to take just a minute and kind of refresh our memories about what's going on the east coast of Africa with the Swahili city-states. Remember that Swahili is kind of a mixture of Arabic and Bantu languages. And so we're kind of seeing the intersection of the Arabic trading world and the African trading world. So we're seeing the Arabic stuff and the Bantu stuff kind of coming together here on the east coast of Africa in these Swahili city-states. So these acted as emporia for Indian Ocean merchants. And a lot of them adopted Islam because it helped with trade with the Muslim merchants. This is also where bananas are introduced to Africa. Bananas kind of serve the same role as rice does in Asia and Europe. It is a very calorie-dense food that causes the population to go up after it's imported or after it's introduced from Southeast Asia. So Southeast Asia is kind of giving the world two really important food crops. That fast ripening rice that we get from Vietnam that's spread throughout China and then the Middle East. Bananas are also introduced from Southeast Asia, and they became a really important staple crop in Africa. Okay, so that's pretty much it on Africa until we get into time period 4, when the interactions with Europe are going to kind of speed up. But until then, we're going to stop here on Africa. We'll pick them back up. We'll pick the story of Africa back up when we get into time period 4. But until then, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.